My name is Iannielli, and I am a male to female transgender woman. However, when I say transgender, it is confusing because in reality I am transsexual. There is a big difference between being transgender and transsexual, so when I introduce myself, I should actually say that I'm transsexual. People usually question the difference between being transgender and being transsexual, and there are major differences. I'll give you a brief rundown. I'm no expert by any means. However, I know from personal experience that I fall under the category of true transsexual. And I knew it from a very early age. Actually, I knew when I was 12 years old, when I was at the library and I was reading about an individual who was also transsexual and had the sex change operation. So I knew very young that I was transsexual. Transgender really is for gender variant individuals. If you're transgender, what it really typifies is individuals who identify opposite to their born sex, and they will, do things they feel necessary to satisfy their dysphoria with their birth sex. So a lot of transgender individuals will most likely dress opposite to the norm of their birth sex. The term is cross-dressing. I'm throwing out a lot of terms. Gender dysphoria is a term that really is where your feelings towards your physical body don't match your perceived gender identity. So you're at odds with your birth sex and how you feel. And people who have gender dysphoria usually struggle with depression, and they don't feel happy. It's a big struggle for individuals that identify as transgender or transsexual and struggle with gender dysphoria. Transgender individuals also can eventually identify as transsexual. It's a continuum, and you can fluctuate along the spectrum. I initially started out cross-dressing, and I further continued in the direction towards being transgender, but I knew from a very young age that I was in fact transsexual. Transgender individuals may or may not feel it's necessary to take steps in bringing their bodies more in line to how they feel. So if they, let's say in the case of a male to female transgender individual, they will dress up obviously in women's clothes even though they're born male, and they may or may not feel it's necessary to take hormones, or they may or may not feel it's necessary to do electrolysis or laser. So it's a very fine line between being transgender and transsexual, because the transsexual will have no hesitation with doing electrolysis or laser. They will not have any hesitation with doing hormone replacement therapy. And obviously, the main goal for a transsexual individual would be gender or sex reassignment surgery, where they truly alter their body to match their identified gender, how they perceive themselves. I identify as a male to female transsexual, but I'm a pre-op. I have not had any surgeries whatsoever. The only thing I've done to date is electrolysis, hormone replacement therapy, and dressing full-time as a woman. I've been doing that for the past 3 years. I've been on hormones, female hormones, estradiol, and a testosterone blocker, spironolactone, for the last 2.5 years. And I've been doing electrolysis for about 2.5 years as well. And I hope eventually to do gender reassignment surgery or sex reassignment surgery. Actually, I've put an application in, but I'm waiting for my psychiatrist and therapist to eventually give me the go-ahead. Right now, they're not. So it's very hard for me. I'm struggling. And I'm going through hell with my gender dysphoria and depression. And I truly want to have the surgery so I can live and be a female, as I've always known I should. I don't have any guilt about being transsexual. At one point in my life, I felt very guilty. I felt very depressed because I felt I shouldn't have these feelings, and I tried to suppress them, hide them. I ran away from it. I didn't know what else to do, and I've pushed myself into the male role. I studied engineering. I wanted to prove that I could fit in, and a therapist who I was going to convince me not to go the route of transitioning. This was my first round of therapy, and actually introduced me to a girl who I started to date. We eventually married, so I pushed myself into dating women. I hadn't dated much, and the first woman I dated, I married, and then I wanted to be a father, so we had a son. We have a son who is now 16, and he's the love of my life, and I'm very proud of him, and I'm happy as a father to him. He's got his own struggles, like I have mine. He's autistic, and I struggle with my gender. I have gender dysphoria, and I am openly a male to female transsexual woman, and I've started living full time as a woman. I've been living full time now for about 2.5 years. It took a long time for me to come to realize who I truly was, even though deep down in my heart I always knew. I think most people who are transgender or transsexual do run away from their feelings, and it's very hard for them to face up to them. It's very few that are seeking to transition early, but the statistics are increasing for youth who do take the initiative to transition early, and I highly commend them, and I believe that if they truly feel in their heart that they identify as opposite gender to their birth sex, then they should do all they have to conform. And if they have accepting parents, I think that's wonderful. full agreement with them in their choice to go forward in their transitional journey. I think if you do it at a younger age, especially in your youth, certainly you will benefit. There are pros and cons, obviously. The one main thing is that if you transition, you will lose the benefit of having a natural child, or there are cases where you can, I guess, pre-plan, or you can adopt. But I think that the transgender, transsexual movement is gaining ground, and hopefully people are starting to realize that there's nothing wrong with us who are identified as transgender or transsexual. We're just everyday people who feel trapped in their bodies. I feel I should have been born a woman, a girl. I was born with the wrong body. I was born with a boy's body and a girl's mind. And that is what typically is the definition of someone who is transgender. They're born with the wrong body and mind. The body doesn't match the mind, and the mind doesn't match the body. Hence gender dysphoria, hence gender identity disorder, hence transgender, hence transsexual. It all goes hand in hand. And if you're struggling with depression and gender dysphoria, obviously you need to seek help. And you need to go to a counselor, you need to see a therapist, you need to go on a regular basis, and you need to share your experiences, how you feel, what it is that makes you, identify the way you do. And you need to dig deep into your soul and let others know what it's like to be who you are. Like I said, you shouldn't have any shame. Being transgender is a beautiful thing if you look at it from that perspective. And you have to just enjoy the fact that you're different, Granted, it's a very difficult road if you're transgender, and it's even more difficult if you're transsexual. And the heartbreak for some transsexual individuals is that it's so costly that a lot of transsexuals can't afford this gender reassignment surgery or sex reassignment surgery. And not all of these transsexual individuals have insurance to cover the surgery. Insurance now I know in New York State, it's now mandatory that the insurance covers the surgery for transsexuals. So you are lucky in that regard, but not all transsexuals have insurance, and there are other factors that may prevent surgery. In my case right now, I've been in the hospital many times for depression, so my psychiatrist and my therapist refused to write the letter of approval giving me the go-ahead for surgery, which is very frustrating, and I'm very depressed over it because I'm struggling with gender dysphoria, and a lot of my depression is because of that. So I'm in a very bad situation. I'm in a catch-22 situation, and I don't know how to get out of that other than to stay focused and not fall into any form of depression that will land me back into the hospital. So I have to stay clear and focused and have that vision that eventually I'll get the go-ahead so I can move forward with my surgery, my hopes in having surgery. But it's not going to happen for some time, and I'm not getting any younger. So I just wish that my medical professionals would realize that it really upsets me, and I just sometimes wonder why I have to have all these obstacles to deal with. You know, there are so many who are able to have surgery and they don't have, they're not 100% stable, but they're lucky to get the support and the clearance. I always knew in my heart eventually that I would have to face some difficult decisions, and for me, coming out was very hard, and I really never thought I really never thought I could do it. It was a very emotionally draining time for me, and it was gut-wrenching, and having a son and a wife made it more difficult, and I tried to run away from it, and I succumbed to a severe depression and wound up in the hospital because of it. So when you do find yourself struggling with your gender identity and you don't know what to do about it, it's very important that you seek out someone to talk to. And if you don't have a therapist available, then you need to reach out on the internet to find resources that will pinpoint you to a therapist, or you need to call your insurance company to help you narrow down doctors and therapists that can help you. And you also may need to reach out to the hotlines that are out there that support transgender individuals. There are very good hotlines to call, and you need to avail yourself of any of these choices, because you just don't need to feel like you're all alone. Definitely you're not. And you must realize that, when I was coming out, I went on the internet and I found some helpful websites, which I would highly recommend. One such website was the crossdressers.com website. Another website, Facebook was something that evolved later. That is very helpful. They have lots of groups. And YouTube is another source that I found very helpful with the videos. And the helplines I found very helpful. I've reached out on the hotlines a couple of times. Even the suicide hotline I called a couple of times. So I think that when you decide that you need to transition and you're struggling with it, you gotta talk about it. And I think you need to be honest with your family, your spouse, your children, and you need find the right way to share that. For me, I was agonizing on how I would share my feelings on my gender issues and how I was going to transition. I didn't feel comfortable having to face telling my son or my wife. It was very hard for me emotionally, and I don't know how I was able to find the inner strength to eventually come out and tell them. Obviously, I respected their privacy, and I respected their feelings in coming out. And I always knew that I would have to face that day, and it wasn't something that I was looking forward to. But since I've started transitioning with hormones and the electrolysis and just living full time as a woman, I feel much happier. I've never felt happier because now I'm living as I truly feel inside. The way I present myself as a woman is consistent to how I feel. So I'm matching how I feel in here to my body. I obviously am only in initial stages, and I certainly hope to have surgery, hopefully sooner than later. And it's very difficult because I've been struggling all my life, and I don't know, sometimes I wonder why it has to be this way. It's very hard, and I wish I had the answers. I'll never know why I felt like I was a girl from the very beginning. I was never pointed out as sissy though. Nobody ever made fun of me in that regard. Nobody ever called me names or anything. I just felt that I was trapped and that I should have been born a female. And certainly I would never push that on anyone, especially my son and my family. And I treat my son as a father, as he knows me, and I always tell my son that I'm his father no matter what. Even if I'm transitioning to become a woman, I will always be a father to my son, and I will always love him and cherish him as a father does. Just transitioning basically for my own inner peace and happiness. I figure in life you only get one chance, and you may as well be happy. And if you struggled with your gender from early in your life, you know that it's very essential that you take the initiative to do what you always felt you needed to do. It's a very serious matter. It's a medical issue, and don't let people tell you otherwise. You know, a lot of people look at being transgender as being abnormal, and they don't believe that it's a medical issue, and they just are very ignorant and very cruel. And I don't like to deal with people like that. Unfortunately, sometimes you have no choice, but you don't have to listen to them. You can tune them out, ignore them, and just look at them as, ignorant. And they just don't have the right sensibilities, and it's not
something that you should worry about. You know who you are, and you should stay true to that and not care what others think. Just live your life the way you've always felt you should, and be happy doing so, and never give up, and never give in, and never let someone else steal your dreams away. If you identify as a female and you were born male and you want to transition, then you should do it. And God will be there for you and help you along the way. And hopefully you'll have supportive family and friends. Certainly that will help. But regardless, if you have to do it, transition, you need to. Don't fall short, and you need to help yourself. It took me a long time to get to this point in my life, but I knew in my heart that I had to face it sooner or later. And once I hit my 50s, it was like a time bomb ticking, and I had no choice anymore. I couldn't run away, and I couldn't hide. I had to confront it, and my way of confronting it was to realize that I had to transition. It was a matter of life and death for me. I figured if I didn't transition, I probably would have killed myself. So you have to know that it's okay, and that, the world will still run, and nothing will stop. If you have family, hopefully they'll love you for who you are, and if they don't, then you have to make some decisions. But hopefully you'll have support of family and friends. That won't always be the case, unfortunately, but you have to make the right choices, and sometimes transitioning is the right choice, and you should never feel guilty. If that is the way you need to go, then you should do it, and never look back. But just remember, there are ramifications that come with making that decision, and you need to see a therapist and talk it out, and make sure that you feel comfortable and that you're doing the right thing. And most likely you are, but you have to know from inside, and that will come, and you'll know when that moment is right. So I pray that you will make the right choice, that you'll feel comfortable with it, and that your life will eventually be what you're supposed to be. If you identify as a female, then by all means you should transition to be a female. And I don't think that you should ever feel guilty about that. Just take one day at a time, live your life, find your true inner happiness, and always still be there for your family and your children, and just be happy for what you have and for who you are,